Ready for a change?
I am talking to you.
Then get ready to explore the quantum possibilities. It's time to transform that outdated paradigm into something universal and new. Time to uncover the truth hidden beneath the veil of lies. A time to think outside the box as we link to a higher consciousness. Welcome to the awakening. And now the hosts of Broadcast Team Alpha, Nori Love and Augie Nost.
Hello, everybody. Here we are again, live on KCOR Radio from Las Vegas, Nevada, with coffee in hand and ready for some cutting-edge conversations on what is outside of the box. My name is Augie, and I'm one of the hosts, and my co-host Nori cannot be with us today. She had a little mishap with one of her little dogs, and she called me from the emergency room at the vet hospital. So I hope both girls will be okay by the time the day is over. And we have a phenomenal guest with us tonight. But before I introduce our guest, I'd like to tell you how you can connect with us. You will find us at broadcastteamalpha.com, and we are on YouTube with the same name. And yes, when you go to YouTube and check it out and check our other shows, we got some doozies up there, all the way from how to reverse the aging process as science says it can be done, to time travel equipment I demonstrated on a BBC television documentary years ago, and how to tap into the universal consciousness all around us. It's all there. Just go have a look at it. And when you are at the YouTube channel for Broadcast Team Alpha, please subscribe and click the little bell next to it. That's going to be important for those of you that do that. You will get a little notification when the new shows are coming out. And if you want to hear this show again, just go to broadcastteamalpha.com, YouTube or Twitter, and about 6 or 7 other platforms that we are transmitting on. And of course, at KCOR Radio. In the archives under Broadcast Team Alpha, we will be right there at kcorradio.com. And down at the bottom, while you are on kcorradio.com, down at the bottom of the page, there is this wonderful little feature. It's a donate button. If you like what you hear and you enjoy this, we love for you also to see if you can help us and show us some gratitude that way. But if you can't, that is perfectly all right. We love you. We are glad you are here listening, and please stay with us. And now I'm going to introduce you to our guest. And we have Dr. Heather Lynn with us. She is a historian. And she says herself that she is a renegade archaeologist and defender of classic and old-fashioned education. She is a professor of humanities by day and a truth seeker by night. In her research, she has uncovered lost wisdoms of antiquity, challenging what we find in the accepted history books. She is the author of several books on hidden history, ancient mysteries, the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, and other mysteries. And she is a sought-after guest on radio shows everywhere, like Coast to Coast AM, and of course, right here on this show. And yes, she has a solid education as an undergraduate degree in archaeology, an MA in history, and a doctorate in education. And a few other things that is on her bio, and I have to cut that short, otherwise I'll be talking for the next 20 minutes. And it is becoming obvious by listening to her shows that she did not let her education get in the way of her learning. Or, as better said yet by Napoleon Bonaparte. And he said, history, what is it but a fable commonly agreed upon? So let's hear a little more about this revisionist history. Welcome to the show, Dr. Heather Lynn.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Let me start out with just a kind of a personal question. You have stepped out of the box early in your career, and what made you do that instead of going to become a professor at an accredited major university and get all the recognition and everything that many others do? Why did you go out and hunt down the truth instead of staying there?
Well, I initially thought that I would just stay there or just go that traditional route. I took a non-traditional path to do that. I started at a community college and worked my way up as much as I could. And so I had a very sort of naive understanding of the whole education process and what it entailed and the political components to that. And so I went in starry-eyed and excited and ready to go. And I started to get pretty disenchanted along the way with a lot of the corruption and different things that I saw, and also just a lack of true education. There was just not the focus on real learning or critical thinking or analyses that I thought should play a part in higher education. And so, I came across a lot of different circumstances that just got me thinking, well, I don't know if this is really what I need to do in this regard. And I always had this love of alternative ideas. And that stemmed from my even less traditional background of having dropped out of high school and left and traveled the country, traveled everywhere, met a lot of different people, and listened to a lot of late night radio. And in doing so, I was fascinated with the stories of this just unknown world that we live in and how little we know about it, and how all these interesting people with these interesting ideas were just talking about these things late at night. And I would meet people in truck stops and restaurants like Waffle Houses and talk to them about their personal experiences and sightings. And I believed them to be telling the truth. And so I thought, well, there is just an unknown world out there, a complete, to take a term from Whitley Strieber, an unknown country. And I was fascinated by that. And so I've always been fascinated, but I thought, that's just for fun and I'm going to go the traditional route. But the more I looked into it and I thought, I want to explore these ideas. And I think that, they should be legitimately explored. Why can't I do that? And so I tried to introduce that in my traditional study, and I was just completely ridiculed. And, it was not, it was told to me quite early I would never be able to have any sort of recognition for my work if I explored these alternative ideas, and that I had to toe the line. And, there were so many other things that happened, a lot of different, corruption and schemes, money-making schemes and grant things that just the whole thing turned me off. But, so I went on my own, and this was after actually having an email exchange with Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archaeology. And I asked him his advice, and he gave me good advice. He didn't steer me in one direction or the other. He really just kind of laid it out and said, if I stayed in academia, I could, push the envelope ever so slightly and make a change. But if I left, I could pursue whatever I wanted to, but I would also be lacking the education and perhaps the credibility in order to do that, which is, kind of funny because there is no credibility. Credibility is something that is, I think, a construct in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously important if you want to go get surgery and somebody is going to, do open heart surgery. You want those credentials, but something in the soft sciences or the social sciences like history or archaeology, it's a little less precise. And it's definitely an area where there's this sort of qualitative approach to it where you, the word itself, his story, there's a story aspect to it that's less quantitative. Because it has to be, because we don't yet have the ability, at least that we know of, to time travel and witness these events of the past. And so, So that's what I did. I kind of leapt out of it and pursued my own interest, and so that's where we have it. I did go back, and I'm teaching in a community college because I felt that was probably the last bastion of hope for education at this point, because of the people who tend to go to community colleges. They are really there to learn. They really are motivated, and that's something that I thought I could make a difference in it. It's just more my scene.
Yeah, I totally agree. And sooner or later, we, even though that we are listening to what they're telling us in the regular education system, but we have to be true to ourselves. Otherwise, we can't be happy.
Exactly.
And the happiness part of it, once we start going after that, the education system goes off the rail for us. You can't marry the two of them, the way I look at it.
Oh, no, not at all. And I came across that when I went back to school, because again, I went in a little later, and I thought, well, I'll do the right thing and study, say, business or something. I really didn't feel that I could follow my true interests. And once I got in there, I thought, well, why not? You live once, and it's about being happy. And I thought it's not about money. It's not about prestige or any of those things. It's about trying to pursue your dreams and your interests and seeing what you can do then to make some sort of difference in the world. So I'm glad I did it. No regrets.
And it's becoming obvious to it that Napoleon was right, wasn't he? When he was talking about history being a fable.
That's one of my favorite quotes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you have done so much and researched so much, and you have written, I think, 3 or 4 books now. And I think you said on one show too that you get a couple of more in the workings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm working on a book. It's actually a follow-up to Evil Archaeology. This one is Sacred Archaeology. It's all about angels, miracles, and holy relics. So it's I looked at it like a chaser. After writing Evil Archaeology, I needed something positive to follow it up. So it's been much better experience researching those topics.
And we got 2 halves of the show here. Let's make sure that we get your website and also your books out in the both halves. So give people your website and also mention your books so they got something to look for.
Oh, sure. My website's www.drheatherlynn.com. That's drheatherlynn.com. You can find all my books and different things there, like the Anunnaki Connection and Evil Archaeology. And if you look and want to sign up for my newsletter, you get free ebooks on lost wisdom, the burning of libraries. There's an ebook there that you'll get for free about the secret history of the Masonic influence of the American Revolution and all sorts of global revolutions. So, good stuff. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, that'd be good. And you just mentioned something here. You most people don't know that most of the founding fathers, they were Masons.
Yes, that is something that some people know and some people don't, and there's a confusion about it. Like, were they good Masons, bad Masons? What did they know? And so it's a really interesting study. And in the free ebook I give away, I include George Washington's personal letters that he wrote discussing his Masonic interests and his warning against the infiltration of the Illuminati, because that's something he was concerned about, was that this was an internal takeover that the Illuminati were going to, and well, he was not far from truth, was he?
Yeah, he got really close there. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned another word, the Anunnaki. Can we dwell on that a little bit? Because I've done a lot of research into that, and I'll tell you, our history is totally, the ancient history anyway, is totally screwed up in the history books.
Yes, I think there's a lot of it that's just fabricated. I think a lot of it's I pull out a lot of examples in some of my work about some blatant fabrications that have become just mainstream knowledge that have long since been debunked. But yeah, so the Anunnaki, I mean, where to begin on that? That's something so fascinating that, for such a long time, people have been fascinated with the Egyptians, and rightfully so. They were an amazing culture and filled with, amazing history and stories and myths and artifacts. But many people, until rather recently, I would venture to say, were unaware of the existence of the Sumerians, which was an equally great culture, if not in some ways, dare I say, greater culture, because they laid the foundation for all of this magnificent, just progress that the Egyptians are known to have had, but that the Sumerians really laid the groundwork for that. And the Anunnaki were their gods. And
yes.
So there's a lot of surrounding mysteries with that. And, I think what's really amazing is that now people are really starting to want to learn more about them and understand who the Anunnaki were and who they are. And they're looking into these things, and not just in a mainstream way or an alternative way, but just in a more comprehensive way. That's what I at least was hoping to do with my book on the Anunnaki Connection. I was trying to connect those kind of worlds, the different paradigms of what the quote, legitimate scholars would say versus the quote fringe scholars and this sort of thing. And I tried to find that common ground and see, what is it that they have in common, and what is right and what is wrong, or at least where to begin answering those questions. So there's a lot.
The Sumerian tablets, they speak very eloquently about the Anunnaki. They explain who they were, how they came here, and what they did, and what they created. And gosh, where do you even start when you want to explain something like that?
Oh, so many stories, and many of which, were the basis for the Bible stories of the Old Testament. And I think that's partly why they've become so controversial, or at least they were when the tablets were discovered, and closer to the end of the Victorian era and the turn of the century. As people started to discover these tablets and translate them and make an actual discipline out of learning these cultures and the language, it became clear that it was going to be controversial, because here we are finding stories that talk of things like Noah's Ark and the creation of man and Adam and Eve, and all of these different things that were predating the Hebrew Bible by thousands of years. And so that in and of itself was controversial. Very
much so. And the funny part about it is that they maintain some of the names, like the Hebrew God, was that Jehovah?
Mm-hmm.
And that name goes back much further back than what they talk about even in the Torah, I think. So there's some really ancient connection when they speak about, I guess the first that I found with the word God came back out into the light was right from the Sumerian tablets. It meant great leader. So I don't have any problem with the word God anymore.
No, I don't. I think a lot of these terms are terms that, are culturally different, but I think they really point to a similar phenomenon. I think we all, throughout time and geography and, our experiences, we as a people develop different names and titles for some of the same things that we're all experiencing on this planet as humans. And then sometimes we get wrapped up in those semantics, with, my God is this name or your God is that name, and who's right and who's wrong. And now we'll fight, when at the end of the day, if we take those labels away and look at the core of it, you'll find more similarities than differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Anunnaki, they talk a little bit about how they came here, because that is very eloquently explained in some of the tablets.
Yes, it is. I think there's a real important distinction between certain groups of Anunnaki that if you find some stories discuss them coming from a far off place, another one discuss that they were, ghosts in a lot of ways. There's all these different attributes to the Anunnaki. And so in my research, what I found was that the term Anunnaki was so broad that you'd have to kind of look deeper at which groups were what and what they were doing and when did they exist or were believed to have existed. And then you start to sort of unravel the mystery, I think. So for instance, they had a Holy Trinity. And it was very similar to the Christian Holy Trinity with a God, a Father, and a Holy Spirit and this sort of thing. And this was kind of a unit in and of itself, as you would imagine a Trinity would be in the way that we understand it in sort of a Western Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. But that is set aside. Those are also Anunnaki. Then you have another group of beings that came before the Anunnaki that are also referred to as Anunnaki, and they were described as being semi-biological beings. So they were half man, half potentially fish, or at least they appeared to be like fishmen, but they also had an otherworldly component to them that they could shapeshift. And then you have the Anunnaki, a different form where you have sort of the predecessors to the 12 Olympian gods. You have these very human-like sounding figures that, would drink and, fornicate and fight with each other and do all these things and have petty arguments. And but here they all reside in the same kind of reality of Anunnaki. And so I liken it to the word Lord. Like you could say Lord Jesus, Lord God, Lord Shiva, or landlord, or Lord of the Manor. At some point, I believe the word Anunnaki became a generalized term that describes all of these different sort of beings.
Yeah, I think so too. It's been summarized more or less, so so we can use the word God, or we can use the word even great leader if we want to.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see we're coming up against a break here, and when we talked just very briefly before the show, you mentioned also one of your favorite things to talk about was consciousness. So when we get back after the show, I would like you to dwell a little more on the Anunnakis, and when it comes to what it talks about in the Sumerian tablets about the creation of man. And because a lot of people think that, well, yeah, they created us, but was it all of us or maybe not? So let's talk a little bit about that, and I would love to get into consciousness after that. Could we?
Absolutely.
All right. So then we got about 30 seconds left to the break. So let's do break now, and then we will be back.
This is the Broadcast Team Alpha Show, hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. The one show that takes your doubts of the unknown and spins them into reality. Share your thoughts by calling our hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More cutting-edge conversation and exploration of the quantum universe after this. Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Love, light, and the paranormal. Hosted by Reverend J. Live every Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
No mercy, no pity, no fear.
Come explore the world of the paranormal with distinguished and sometimes not so renowned authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world. Whether it's love and light or the darkness of the abyss.
This is insanity! ready.
We go down the road others are afraid to travel. The only question is, are you ready for it? Love, Light, and the Paranormal. Hosted by Reverend J. Live Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Your paranormal voyage starts here.
Great.
It's great. I think it's great. I think it's
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
great.
Make a note of it.
It's great.
If you love them enough to barely sleep, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
Looking for a radio show like no other?
We need something brand new.
Then tune into the KCOR Digital Radio Network, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and get ready for The Quantum Shift. A great shift of consciousness is sweeping across the Earth. Are you ready for the dimensional shift?
It is amazing, is it not?
The Quantum Shift. Quantum Shift. Quantum Shift. Hosted by Dr. Sam Muggsy and Kent Dunn. Be part of the fifth dimensional reality, where consciousness prevails and the universal law of one is the only true reality. The Quantum Shift. Quantum Shift. Quantum Shift. Live Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Going live.
Come explore the quantum possibilities. This is Broadcast Team Alpha.
Broadcast Team Alpha.
To be on the show live, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. Share your thoughts of the show on Twitter at KCOR Radio, #KCOR. Or join the cutting edge conversation live in our chat room at KCORradio.com. Now back to Broadcast Team Alpha with your free thinking hosts, Nori Love and Augie Nast.
Hello. We are back with Broadcast Team Alpha, and we're talking with Dr. Heather Lynn about ancient history. Maybe also ancient history of mankind, because we were talking about the Anunnaki. And in some of the Sumerian tablets, it seems like several people are translating it like maybe the Anunnaki were the ones that created man. What do you think about this, Heather?
Well, I think that there is so much to explore with that idea, because it's, there's so many different ways to interpret that. So you have, this sort of science fiction notion of them creating man in a lab with beakers and the white lab coats, and they're, doing that. And then other people sort of have this idea that they just, mess with our DNA somehow, or, there's so many ideas out there. But what I think is so far, I mean, my mind can always change because this is unfolding as it happens. I've been actively researching this, and I plan to continue. But where I am right now is I believe that the Anunnaki, they were a group of advanced living beings who settled in a mountain valley in the Near East around 8200 BCE. And when they did this, they brought amazing technologies to the people that were there already. And these would have been the sedentary, late Epi-Paleolithic hunter-gatherer groups. And so you had a group of humans that were already there, and they were referred to as the Adama. And in Hebrew, the Adama translates to ground, and the word Adam in Hebrew literally means red. And so the idea was that this connected Adam to the red soil of an uncultivated plain. And so this connection's been sometimes recognized as a reference to human beings being created from the clay of the earth. And in a lot of religious scholarship, this is a debated sort of idea is whether or not it was because God created a human being out of the clay of the earth. And so it's easy to surmise then that the Adama, which the Anunnaki also called the black-headed people, was not the first name of a singular person, but rather it described the first hunter-gatherer tribes that were then later civilized by the Anunnaki. So these people were not only distinguishable by their black hair, but they were also described as red, hence the Adama. And so, I was looking into this and thinking how interesting it would be that, their red might be associated with the red earth, not necessarily because, the man was created out of red clay, but perhaps because they used ochre, like many primitive people did, and sometimes, still do in some areas, dare I say primitive, but there are many archaeological studies that show that the people in that area, the hunter-gatherer groups, used ochre and potentially on their bodies. And one particular archaeological discovery was that of an adult male's head, that it was the cranium that showed this red pigment all over it. And the archaeologists reported that the male had this ochre pigment all over the cranium, and it demonstrated that the cranium had been defleshed at the time of burial. So this is one of the oldest occurrences of deliberately pigmented human remains in the Near East. And so there's other types of ochre fragments found in this general area where the Anunnaki was said to have settled. And this was discovered in layers of archaeological excavations. And it's a very specific type of iron oxide veins that occur in these deposits in Mesopotamia. And so it's very much tied to the region. It's the ochre used to produce red pigments and, all these different things that they used at the time. So, it's not just an average, maybe clay color or rust. It's very deep red. And so it's been known that they were using it in their burials. And so it would make sense to surmise that they could have been using it on their bodies in a decorative way. So if you think about those hunter-gatherers at the time in Mesopotamia, they would have potentially rubbed themselves down with this red ochre and had black hair, hence the descriptions in the ancient tablets that recount these people as being red people or the black-headed ones or black-headed red people. And so here you have this really interesting culture clash, if you will. And these amazing individuals, these Anunnaki, had kept alive the sacred knowledge of arts and sciences that are very characteristic of what is considered high culture, things like astronomy or medicine, math and those sorts of things. But that they were displaced from a different homeland due to, in my belief, after looking at the evidence, a climatological disaster, a near extinction event, possibly triggered by a meteor, accounting then for these great flood myths. Mm-hmm. So as a result, if you look at this original Noah story, you see it's not this case of a man who brought his family together and took, all these just animals, and it was not like that in the original story. In the original story, it was very important that the people that boarded, that boarded the caravan, if you will, this idea of leaving, they were the, not relatives per se, but they were the high priest class. They were the ones who were the experts in whatever craft that they had, whatever science or art that they did. In addition to that, the texts actually say that they brought the animals of the steppe with them. And that was a very specific reference to the animals that they would have needed to survive moving and going away from that area. So only enough animals to allow for food and resources. And so when you consider this, what you're looking at here appears to be a breakaway civilization. And what they did was they moved and resettled in Mesopotamia, and they saw these tribes, and the tribes saw these people as shining gods because of their metallic, ornaments and clothing, and their ability to seemingly control nature through agricultural methods like irrigation and artificial pollination, which is depicted a lot in the art and the tablets as well. But over time, these displaced scholars and scientists would just shape the lives of the Mesopotamian people and then assume leadership positions for whom subsequent leaders would claim lineage in order to maintain that legitimacy. That's where we get the divine right of kings starting to occur. And so in addition to carrying with them these arts and sciences, they brought these occult traditions of what would later become the mystery schools. And part of the mystery practice included the ability to contact off-world entities that they believed to be their non-human sages. And these sages would guide the rulers, serving as a hidden hand in what would become a hierarchical bureaucratic government, which in many ways became a model for other administrative social systems. And so, you have the story then of Enki, the one that would break this class and try to, I guess, reach down to the hunter-gatherers there. So you have this divide of, these powerful beings who had these inflated egos, and they started to stratify social classes between the lower, middle. You hear a lot of that being enslaved, like the Anunnaki enslaved humans. Well, this led to an eventual dehumanization of the locals by these people from another place, so to speak. They treated them like slaves, and then they developed prejudices about who they could and couldn't marry. They wouldn't be allowed to mingle. And so I believe that dissenting members of the sage group objected to this and then ended up, falling, if you will, or, going and representing the Prometheus type story. So you have Enki to the Sumerians, Prometheus to the Greeks, Lucifer to the Gnostics. You have all of these different figures like that is the same sort of story about the, subjugation of a people being forced to work in a garden. And then one of the people or other beings that were enslaving them sort of broke away from that and then taught them things. And then after breaking with their own and giving the Adama, at the time, the forbidden knowledge, the rebel gods around Enki, or this Prometheus figure, would start to assimilate and then be absorbed into the local culture through marriage, with their offspring literally being demonized as the Nephilim. So over time, the story of how humanity was brought out of the wild and organized into civilizations would take on this legendary status, and the gods would be celestialized, mythologized, and then even demonized after centuries of rewriting and revising tablets containing these stories. And so, I think after bestowing this forbidden knowledge, the rebel gods, so to speak, started to, you have this idea of the gods leaving, idea that they disappeared. I think that, there's a twofold issue there, that some sort of assimilated and merged with the locals, and others, maybe the otherworldly entities. That's a whole different story. And that's like what we were talking about closer to the beginning, was how the Anunnaki, these beings that made their way from a different region from the, near extinction event, they, in my estimation, appear to be fully human. But what they brought with them was this idea, their own mystery religion, that they believe they were in communication with the original Anunnaki, the older Anunnaki, the sages, the ones that were described as being otherworldly and in some ways interdimensional. And so were they responsible for creating man? And, I don't believe in necessarily a true biological sense. I think man, Homo sapiens sapiens, were here already when these things started to unfold.
Yeah.
But I think what we've seen over time and in the scientific literature, the idea that life on Earth was seeded from outside our planet by extraterrestrial intelligence, can't really be ruled out. But that would push that timeline back, a lot different. So I think, we got to look at with when the Anunnaki actually would have, been in Mesopotamia, there would have been human beings. So I think the real question is, what was the hidden hand? If that makes sense. So the people that they believed that they were in contact with, that were the ones who gave them the antediluvian knowledge, the ones that they credited with warning them about the flood or giving them this information and telling them to make a breakaway civilization, those strange semi-biological entities from this dimension. I think that is something that, is its own story. And you see that is very ancient. And a lot of it comes from oral tradition that then is like secondhand knowledge. And so, I think there's so much there that it's going to take a long time to really sort it all out. And I'm really excited to be in this time where we can start doing that.
And we're going to discover some of that. What do you think about this theory then that the Anunnaki's home world was Nibiru?
Well, that's something that a lot of people believe. I did for the book. I really tried my best to look into, Nibiru and what it is. And so rather than look at some other people's theories or ideas, which I did do, and that's, an important thing to look at other people's interpretations and try to, stand on the shoulders of giants, if you will. But one of the things I wanted to do was go to the primary sources. And so in what I could find, and of course I can't do an exhaustive literature review or any kind of content analysis on the texts because a lot of them are inaccessible, either to me or to everyone. And so, but from what I could find in mainstream sources, there were very few references to Nibiru in the tablets. And they're often related to the god Marduk, which gives rise then to different interpretations. And so according to the hypothesis that Nibiru can best be translated as a crossing point, which divides the celestial equator, Tiamat is the Milky Way, or the dark stripe in the middle, and Nibiru is located on the Milky Way. So there's some of these ideas that it is this celestial object and that it crosses over, and but again, it was really it's really fragmentary at best. But what I think, I kind of gave it a shot too in the book to see if what could it be. I don't personally feel there's enough evidence to suggest that it's a rogue planet. But if you examine the Akkadian spelling of Nibiru, it is spelled Neberu, and that also means to cross over. And it also means a ferryman, as if you were crossing over to a different world. So if you break that apart and to the very primitive NE and then BE and just look at it like that, instead of a singular word, but a word made up of smaller words, NE meant a brazier or a container for hot coals. It also meant strength or force. And this is coming from the Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary. It's accessible online for anyone who wants to look into this. And the BE meant to diminish or receive. And the RI meant to lay down or cast down or throw down. And so you could interpret Nibiru in its older spelling as meaning a forceful, hot brazier diminishing as it's being cast down onto Earth. So considering that the association made to both stars and deities with Nibiru, it seems reasonable to me to understand Nibiru as a comet rather than a planet. And so if you put yourself in the position of an ancient Sumerian, a brazier or container to hold hot coals could be a sensible and accurate way for them to describe a comet, given that was a reference that they could understand. And, so I think that's kind of what we're looking at there.
That could very well be, actually, because, a comet is one thing, but we also know that there is a huge planet out on the edge of the solar system, because we saw the newspaper article back in 1984, the first ones, when they said they found this huge planet out there, and then everything went dark, and nobody talks about it. So there's something out there that is bigger than many of the planets in the solar system, but we don't know what it is.
I know, and I'm so excited to maybe hopefully we'll find out, but I don't know. I'm starting to doubt that if they do know, that they'll tell us.
Yeah, well, they may have to, because if it shows up in the sky, then we can see it, but it's not here yet. It's going to be a little while.
Yeah.
But another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is one of your favorite things to talk about is consciousness. Are we really real, or are we just consciousness that is projected outwards in a holographic movie where we are the star actor in it?
Wow.
What do you think?
Well, isn't that a question? So there's no easy answer to that.
Yeah, no pressure on that one.
I am fascinated with this idea of the in the world being sort of a simulation. I think there's a lot of interesting, support for that. But I the more I've looked into consciousness in general, I started looking at it in more of a structural brain type sense at first. That's where I was with that. So, looking at understanding the human brain and its physiology, and I had spent some time researching the corpus callosum. It links the hemispheres of the brain together. It's a band of fibrous connective tissue that has between 200 and 800 million axon fibers. And so it's interesting how these fibers are configured in the brain. They just increase in complexity in humans compared to all of the primates, ascending from, say, monkeys to man. So like the humans have this amazing anatomical structure, and it does so much more than just prevents the two hemispheres of the brain from just falling over or falling apart. But it's only really recently been truly studied. And so, I've been fascinated with the idea of the bicameral brain. It's an idea proposed in 1976 by a Princeton psychologist and professor named Julian Jaynes. Jaynes referred to this two-chambered characteristic of the brain as bicameralism. And he had this hypothesis that said that the minds of ancient humans were once in a more unified state, and the eventual division of the brain led to this disintegration of their inner experience, and that led to this sort of master-slave relationship where the hemispheres of the brain would seem to speak while the other one just listened, and he believed that was responsible for giving us sort of an inner voice or an understanding and this sort of thing. And there's a lot of interesting research about that and the role of the corpus callosum and and that, so to speak, but it doesn't explain everything, obviously, because there's that physiological component, but then there's that spiritual, which it sounds pretty vague. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious. And we do know that the spiritual experience can be something that is linked to the brain in a physiological sense too. So it's very enigmatic. But I'll tell you something that I found to be probably one of the closer ways that I think we're going to start understanding consciousness is through the research of psychedelics. And that's not in a way to promote their use or to say that this is, however, and not to disparage anyone who uses them. It's just simply from an objective standpoint, I think that psychedelics are going to be really the key to understanding maybe not ourselves and our biochemistry, but that whole idea of this illusion and how our biochemistry actually works with that external reality and how we then can understand it. So I think it's just a new frontier of understanding that's thrilling.
I think that kind of stuff can open up certain parts of the brain that is more latently asleep, possibly too, so that can gives us a better view of it. Now I see we get less than 3 minutes left of the show. So first of all, let people know where they can get a hold of you, website and email and stuff like that. So let's do that first.
It's drheatherlynn.com. That's drheatherlynn, LYNN.com. And you can email me at heather@drheatherlynn.com. And email, say hi. And I look forward to hearing from anybody. I love talking to people about their theories and that sort of thing. So and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on. And thank you for everybody who's listening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, really quick. If you could talk to the whole world and the world would listen, what would you tell them?
Well, it's simple. It's simplistic, but I would say be kind.
Yeah. Oh, that covers it all. If we are kind, everything else that is good can happen.
You never know what other people are going through, and it's a tough world. It's a Darwinian world of survival, and so the very least we could do is be kind.
Yes, absolutely. And then I thank you very much, Dr. Heather Lynn, for being on here with us, and I surely enjoy it. So I would love to have you back sometime, because we really didn't get all that much into consciousness, and that is my favorite thing to talk about also. So maybe we could do that sometime.
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. And next week, folks, we'll be back here with another show for you. In the meantime, be good to each other.
You've been listening to Broadcast Team Alpha.
Broadcast Team Alpha.
Hosted by Nori Love and Augie Nost. Every Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The balance of power is shifting to a new paradigm. Will you be ready? For more information on Broadcast Team Alpha, as well as the hosts Nori Love and Augie Nost, please visit their website at broadcastteamalpha.com. Until next week, remember to keep those minds open while always exploring the endless quantum possibilities.
Broadcast Team Alpha. Over and out.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.